Now, when it comes to deciding on what watch to buy, size does matter. And the human wrist comes in all different shapes and sizes, just like the watches we want to put on that wrist. And I'm gonna unpack a few tips and tricks for you so that you have a better idea of what size watch will fit you best. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm Aaron. This is Gideonstactical. Let's dive in and have some fun. Now, the timepieces I'm going to be using as a reference today come from VAER watches. They're a California-based company, and we're going to be looking at three particular sizes in their S series of tactical field watches, starting with the largest and going down to the smallest. And for some reference, my wrist measures 7 1/8 of an inch, or about 181 millimeters. And here's where our first tip comes into play: is how do you measure your wrist? Well, all you need to do is get a piece of string, twine. You can even use a shoelace that's laying around, whatever you got. That's about 1 foot long, just so you can kind of easily manipulate it. Put it on the wrist that you'll be wearing your watch, wrap it around, put it right where you would be wearing it with about the tension that you would like to have, and then pull it off. There you go. And then slap it on any ruler or tape measure, and that'll give you your wrist size. Now, when you're looking at a new watch, there are two dimensions that you need to pay attention to help you determine if it's gonna be sized right for your wrist. And we're gonna be looking at the brand new 42 millimeter S5 tactical field watch from VAER. I do appreciate them sponsoring this video and sending me a few different samples in different sizes so I can really walk you through this process. Now, the way a watch is measured is usually in a diagonal angle across the case. So think 10 and 4, maybe 2 and 8 in that angle, and it does not include the crown or the crown guards. Now, that measurement is important, but I would argue that the second measurement actually carries more weight for whether or not the watch will sit well on your wrist, and that is the lug to lug measurement. That is the top to bottom of the body of the watch, including where the straps connect. So that furthest extension piece that is going to really determine if it is really wide and starting to fall off the sides of your wrist, or if it potentially looks really small and petite and is sitting right in the center of your wrist. Picture it like this. If you are looking at your wrist as if you're telling time, the top to bottom or north to south has a limited amount of space. Your wrist is only so wide. But if you go west to east, side to side, we have a lot more arm to work with. And so that top to bottom measurement is really going to determine if it is going to be sitting properly, if it's starting to go too far or too small when you are looking at the timepiece and it's resting on your body and in a regular seated position. So in the case of this VAER 42 millimeter watch, it's actually 48 millimeters from lug to lug. And so for me personally, if we circle all the way back to my wrist size, 7 1/8 of an inch, and just my overall frame. I mean, I'm a big dude, 6'2", a little over 200 pounds. I mean, that's a big frame, so a big watch sits really well on my wrist and kind of fills out the rest and is proportionate to my overall stature and size. But that combination of 42 millimeters in diameter and 48 lug to lug is about the max that I feel comfortable with on my wrist. If I start going larger than that in the lug to lug distance, the wings are going to start protruding past my wrist, and then it's going to become unwieldy and uncomfortable, making the watch feel bulky and too large for my size of wrist. And so is it possible to have too large a watch? Absolutely. And if you are questioning the size and asking yourself, I think this watch might be a little too big for me on my wrist, it probably is. Now, let's switch gears and look at smaller, often called retro or vintage size watches, and how those may come into play. And we're going to be looking at the VAER S3, which is a 36 millimeter diameter watch. And we come to that measurement by going diagonally across the case, just like before, and then the lug to lug measurement is 43 millimeters. So it is noticeably smaller on my wrist compared to the previous 42 millimeter. Now, a smaller watch is often a safe bet because of that retro or vintage moniker that surrounds a smaller watch. And the reason for that is because smaller design watches were very popular at the beginning of the 20th century through World War II. In fact, the S3 is based off of a World War II field watch. And the main reason they were so popular is that a smaller watch requires less materials and therefore it is less expensive to create, build, and therefore purchase, making it easier for the average person to have a reliable timepiece on their wrist, especially in times like the Great Depression in the early part of the 20th century. And that flows right into our modern era. A smaller watch has that retro feel to it, that old-timey kind of experience, and it's classic, it's vintage, it's retro, and therefore the style can still be carried over now, and it's pretty difficult to get too small a watch. Now, there's one more dimension that we need to pay attention to when we're sizing out our watch, and what illusion can sometimes occur depending on the color of the face that we choose and how it presents. But I want to highlight a few features that these VAER watches bring to the table, including a locking screw down crown, which means that it's going to be much more reliable in its 100-meter water resistance. You screw it down so that no water is going to come into the mechanism, and then you have to unscrew it to then pull the crown out fully to engage with the date and the time to adjust, and then you have to screw it down. So there's no accidental bumping, and it's much more reliable in its water resistant capability. That, along with the sapphire crystal over that face, which is scratch resistant. I've run a knife blade across that without any sort of scratches or issues, where I've done that with more inexpensive field watches and wristwatches, and they just scratch up like crazy. Now, the S series is powered by Japanese quartz movement, but they have tons of different designs and movement types, including solar and automatic for you to explore. And I've been wearing my VAER watches for over a year now and taking them out on all sorts of different adventures, and they just keep on ticking. So I'm gonna have a link popping up. It's in the description box below. I invite you to check it out, explore, and get a reliable timepiece for all of your adventures. Now, the different colors of the watch face can present in different ways and give the illusion of size. So a darker hued watch face will obviously seem more compact, smaller, and a brighter hued face will seem brighter, larger, and present more on your wrist. So maybe if you're already kind of feeling like the retro size and retro style is more your taste, and you're still trying to figure out what size might make sense, maybe go with a brighter face back color. And then if you're thinking that you're already on the verge of maybe going a little larger, you just want it to seem smaller on your wrist, maybe consider a darker hue on the face. Now to that final dimension that I haven't talked about in our final size, which is a 40mm S5 by VAER. So it's only 2 millimeters smaller in diameter going across that diagonal sizing across the case, but the lug to lug is about the same, 48 millimeters. And so it's going to present very similar to the 42, but it will be just a hair smaller and be able to fit on more wrists than, say, the 42. And arguably, for a lot of adults, the 40mm is kind of like the Goldilocks size, because it will usually, now this is kind of like a rule of thumb, it's not perfect every time, can fit wrists that measure from 6.5 inches up to 8.5 inches, and it will fit well in that kind of size range and kind of be the best of both worlds. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Now to that final dimension that you definitely want to pay attention to, which is the thickness. You don't want necessarily an Oreo riding on your wrist, because it's going to be not only heavy, it's going to potentially bang up against things more often, and it's going to potentially cause problems on long-sleeved attire. Kind of become a nuisance. So something to consider is the thickness. The field watches that we're looking at today that I feel like are kind of a sweet spot are right around 9.4 millimeters thick. And so that gives kind of a good medium ground. They're not super slim and adding to the compact feel of them, but they're not super thick and bulky, giving you kind of a good starting point. And I've just scratched the surface of sizing and dimensions and things to consider, but I hope it's kind of jump-started either your interest, or maybe you're just wanting to get a nice watch for yourself or a loved one, and this is going to give you some tips and tricks that will better size the watch properly for the individual and for the wrist that you're trying to get that timepiece for. If you have questions, comments, please leave them below. I'll do my best to answer them in the comment section. I really appreciate your guys' time today. If you like weekly gear reviews and content like this, I invite you to subscribe. Make sure to hit the bell icon and the like button. And until next time, always remember, stay equipped, stay prepared, and I'll see you out there.